Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Feel Like Tarot. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to Spooktober Pairings. So basically, as promised, today's video is all about my favorite tarot and oracle pairings for the month of October. And obviously because, as I promised, again, October is going to be dedicated 100% to celebrate Halloween. These are all spooky pairs. So we're going to have a look at some decks that are creepy but cute. So spooky but whimsical. But also we're going to have a look at decks that are really, really dark. Let's do this. Okay, so in no particular order, I've got these two decks that I absolutely love together. They are relatively new. This is the Tarot of the Unexplained. This is the Carol Girls and Aliens Oracle, Ali Grant, and this is by Dave Zilla. By the way, I think the majority of the decks that I'm going to show today are I'm just looking at them now. The majority of them are mass market, but there will be a couple of indie decks and there will be a couple of Kickstarter decks as well. So let's have a look. So this one is definitely one of my most recent acquisitions. It's a tarot deck that, as you can imagine, is based on a lot of supernatural, unexplained events of creatures. This is the Cowgirls and Aliens Oracle. This has been released by Rockpool probably a couple of months ago, and it's actually a really lovely deck. I've come to really appreciate this deck. There's a lot to love. First of all, I absolutely approve and applaud the diversity of, there's pretty much everything: body, shape, skin color, and not so much in gender because it is focusing on cowgirls, so obviously we don't have men in this deck, but for everything else, even when it comes to age, is pretty good, I would say. And it's something that I really appreciate, that all of these publishing companies, they're finally coming to terms with the fact that we don't all look the same, so kudos to them. These two are really good together. I'm having so much fun. This is one of the pairings that I look at when I want to balance out the spookiness of the month. So together with all of these videos based on, darker kind of decks, I'm also reading a lot of horror novels. I'm watching a lot of horror movies. And by the way, my husband and I yesterday watched The Substance. So I'm not gonna give any kind of spoilers, obviously, because otherwise I will completely ruin the movie for you. But if you want to watch it, just prepare yourself. Really, really brace yourself. It is really, what they sell it with as a tagline is that it's the most insane movie of the year. I think that they could probably say it's the most insane movie of the decade, because honestly, that's the impression. We were very good in the sense that I had heard that in the Netherlands, when they were screening it or pre-screening it, at least 10% of moviegoers that bought this ticket said that they actually left the theater before the end of the movie. At some point in the movie, they actually left the theater, which is really interesting. And I told myself and I told my husband, look, it must be really bad for me to actually leave the theater. So I really wanted to watch it till the end, and I'm really glad that I did. I'm not gonna spoil it, obviously, but I'm actually glad that I did, because I felt like leaving in the first probably 20 minutes, half an hour, and then I really thought, you know what, just give it a chance. And I'm really glad that I did, because it's actually very well done. The acting is fantastic. Demi Moore is absolutely amazing. Obviously there's a lot of gore scenes, a lot of body horror. I'm not spoiling anything because this is literally part of the synopsis. A lot of body horror. So if body horror is not for you, I would say stay away. If you're okay with that, then behind the body horror there's an actual tale of feelings, and something very relatable, to be honest. So anyway, really loved it. But as I was saying, when we watch those kind of movies and I read those kind of books, at a certain point I need a bit of a breather, I need a bit of a break. And I feel that the vibes on these two decks are really good for that. So I really like to use these two together. As I said, just to give myself a break from something that is really overwhelming and heavy. Okay, so now in order to bring back the balance, because we've looked at something a bit funny, a bit whimsical, now I'm going to talk about these two decks together. So this is the Tarot Obscuro by Lara Gleboskaya. Again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. I do believe something that I've been told. I've shown this deck a couple of times for the unboxing and then another time. And both times I've been, there were comments from people saying that they find it disturbing. So if, obviously, if this is not your thing, I highly recommend skipping to the next pairing. I don't think this tarot deck is disturbing. I have much more disturbing decks in my collection. But I do recognize that it's very dark. It is very dark. So the combination of images and the ways in which they are portrayed. So I'm just warning that I don't want anyone to feel bad. And so if you're not okay with something really dark, then I don't recommend looking at this pairing. If you're still here, this is actually a magical pairing. I absolutely love these two together. So the Tarot Oscuro, and I'm pairing it up with the Nature Oracle. Or is it the Human Nature? I don't have the box with this deck. Sorry about that. In any case, it's either the Nature Oracle. Actually, I think it's a Human Nature Oracle. Okay, help me out here. Just let me know in the comments below. I know you know it better than me. And but in any case, this one works really well together. And this is the mass market edition, even though I have to say, I saw someone selling the indie edition of this deck in a Facebook group, and I was really tempted to purchase it because it was a very attractive price. However, I don't really see any difference, unless it's a difference in cardstock, which could eventually make it worthwhile, but I'm not entirely sure. If you do have the indie edition of this deck, please let me know if the cardstock is completely different. So this is a semi-gloss, yeah, I would say semi-gloss cardstock. If the indie edition has a matte finish, then I would eventually consider it. I really love the fact that we have this really intense atmosphere, very intense, as you can see here. And we do have similar vibes when it comes to the aesthetics, because obviously there is some kind of a sepia tone in both of the decks. We're looking at photographic decks in both cases. And there are darker vibes. Now, I believe that this oracle is actually balancing out or taking away the edge of the Tarot Obscuro when it comes to the darkness, because I really do believe that there's a lot of calm and a sense of grounding and balance coming out of these characters. Most of them have their eyes closed, but they have their eyes closed in peace. It's a very peaceful kind of message that comes from the cards. And I also love the association with the images, let's say, and also the plants or the botanicals that have been used. It is a very strong bond between, as I said, images, expressions, you know, face expressions and the plants themselves, because you can see that reflected in the keywords. So for example, this is resilience with the yucca plant. And I really feel that this is needed somehow. There's a lot of echoes between these cards, whether it's because the hairs are spiky, perhaps they're spiky because, you know, it's kind of a, I don't know what this is. It's a, spikes on a helmet, something like that. I can't really tell, but in this case you can clearly see it's the lupine and it's the branches, so obviously it's completely different. You have these kind of completely let's say two concepts in an opposite side of a spectrum, but at the same time it does create a sense of balance, again, you know, with the spikes on the head. Again, with the spikes on the head. So it is a very common theme to find symbols that really look similar in the two decks. But at the same time, I really do appreciate the sense of balance that I get out of the, especially out of the Oracle, or the action of the Oracle. Again, really, really beautiful pairing, and very dark, but at the same time, some kind of soothing coming from the Oracle. And the next pairing that I wanted to show you is something that lies in between. So it is between these two decks. This is the Macabre Tarot by Sam Rook. I believe when she published it, she still went by Samantha. They still went by the name Samantha West. Now they go by the name Samantha Rook. So if you're feeling confused as to who's who, it is the same person, but they went with a different name when they published older, let's say, kind of decks. And this is the Devil's deck, and it's just a spree created by Shiva Honey. The illustrations are by Alexandra Corey, Lucian Greaves, and Shiva Honey themselves. It is a very interesting pairing, and the reason why I was saying that it lays more or less in between, so it's not too dark, but it's also definitely not whimsical, is because I really believe that Sam Rook's art is amazing, but at the same time it is a bit campy. So let me just explain, because I don't want to say anything disrespectful. I absolutely love Sam Rook's art. I believe that it's done on purpose. So this is the Macabre Tarot. So obviously the themes are very macabre, as you could expect. But at the same time, I feel like there is something whimsical. At least I see it that way. And I guess that obviously if you're not used to horror movies or horror books, this may not necessarily feel like whimsical when you look at the art style and the images. But to me, it does. It feels a bit whimsical. It feels like a bit over the top, but done on purpose. So there is this sense of expressing the horrors, but at the same time, there is that sense of saying, I know that what I'm showing you is too horrific, and at the same time, the human mind goes to the other end of the spectrum and probably chuckles. Whether it's a chuckling because you feel uncomfortable, like in this image, for example, but it's still a chuckle. And that's what I call campy. And I might be completely wrong, but that is kind of a deal. You know, when you look at horror genre or horror tropes, sometimes you do have this kind of mix between horrific things that you see on the screen and the things that are still horrific, but they make you laugh. And so, for example, there is a movie that I believe is really campy, and it's The Cabin in the Woods from a few years ago. And I remember watching it, and there were some scenes that were just, everyone was laughing out loud because they were just really too horrible. But at the same time, they made you laugh. So I don't know, it might be a way for the brain to protect yourself. And in the meantime, let's have a look at these cards, because I really believe that we're looking at a very beautiful kind of pairings here. So we have this sense of really strong, darker vibes that come from the Devil's deck, but at the same time, because of the beautiful art style of Sam Rook, we also have this kind of relations between the cards. And I really, really love it. So there is something to be said. The Macabre Tarot is a mass market deck, this one, but this is the Devil's deck, and I have to be honest with you, I've never seen it anyway. I've only found it for sale at a expo. It's not the Auditors and Curiosity, it was a different one that we had in Sydney a few months ago. and there was this reseller that had very similar kind of decks, but they had this one. It was the last copy, and so I just reached out and bought it because it looks really beautiful, and it is that kind of a black and white that I believe goes really well with the macabre tarot, even though the macabre tarot does have splurges of gold, which makes it really, really beautiful, by the way. And it's there is this kind of an atmosphere. I mean, sometimes you look at the cards and you think it's all dark, but at the same time it's not. So I really like using these two together, and for this reason I believe that we're looking at something in between the darker pairings and the lighter ones. So the next pairing is actually 3 decks, and it is these ones here, which are basically now become very quickly my favorite ones from Patrick Valenza. I do have the standard edition of the Deviant Moon and the borderless edition of the Deviant Moon. I also have the coffee table book, which is absolutely fantastic because it talks about the process of creating this deck, and it's really fascinating. But I have to say, I feel like the paradoxical edition is ironically more balanced than the standard edition, and then the Zama Twins Oracle and the Abandoned Oracle X-Ray edition. Now I have to say thank you to all of you who confirmed to me that they had a positive experience with LT Tarot in Ho Chi Minh City. I did buy these 3 in that shop, and it's an amazing shop that has some fantastic stock. Both for mass market decks, but also, as you can see, for indie decks or special edition of decks. And obviously my interaction was great, but that's because I went there physically. I went to the shop. I was in Ho Chi Minh City a couple of months ago. Whereas I wanted to say thank you to all of you who reached out to me saying that indeed they they purchased something from them and they had a good experience. And the decks are absolutely genuine. They are legit decks, they're numbered, etc. I mean, I already knew that because obviously I had been there, but there were a couple of people on Instagram saying not so nice things about that shop, which is very sad because honestly it's not true what they were saying. These are legit decks. So thank you to all of you who confirmed that they also received a legit decks from the shop. So now these are 3 decks obviously, and we have some different vibes because obviously these 2 are paradoxical or X-ray editions and this one isn't. But that's why I'm actually putting them this way, because I believe, let me just level them out, I believe that this actually works a lot better. And I don't know what to say about the vibes of these 3. They obviously pair up really well together because there is this sense of dark, but also there's body horror, definitely body horror in all of these 3 decks. At the same time, I do feel like saying that some of the cards are a bit campy, for example, like this one, but it is horrific at the same time. And yet, I feel that because we're looking at an XA or paradoxical edition of these 2, at the same time, we have this sense of balance. I was using the standard edition of the Deviant Moon, and most of the time I'm kind of finding the images or some images confronting, probably because my brain recognizes what happens in the scene immediately. But when you look at a deck that actually changes the colors in reverse, as if we were looking at the negatives of these images, the brain does something really funny. At least my brain does something really funny, and it kind of chooses to focus on something other than, let's say, the scary parts of the cards or the awkward part of the cards or the weird part of the cards. And I actually really find that therapeutic in a way, because that way I can give more room to my interpretation, to the intuition of these cards. I mean, let's look at this one, for example, the Backstabber. I believe that because it is X-ray, I don't tend to focus too much on the image, but I have a bird's eye view of the image and I focus on the keyword, and that really helps. And you know, if you look at the other card from the Divya Moon Tarot, in this case it is a Two of Swords, and it feels like there is this sense of backstabbing as well, but even though these two are fighting against each other. Now, obviously, in order to use the Summer Twin, I need to go back to the book, the guidebook, every now and then, because I'm not entirely sure about how to interpret the cards. Most of the time, we're looking at titles rather than keywords. And even though I know about the Mandrake, for example, I might not necessarily, or I know about Mercurius, or perhaps I can imagine what the Glutton card is trying to convey to me. But there might be other cards that I'm not entirely sure about. Even though I have to say, by looking at them now, it is not that difficult to assign some kind of a keyword or a meaning to these cards. Layla, for example. Layla, I would definitely have to go back to the guidebook because I'm not entirely sure. But the leather is pretty cool, it's pretty clear to me. And ironically, we got a leather here and the leather here with the thief, so perhaps we're looking at the same kind of message. In any case, this is a really beautiful kind of pairing, even though, as I said, these might be decks that are not easy to procure. I know that the Summer Twin, this is the second edition and it's probably still in stock or just ran out of stock at Patrick Valenza's website. But these two are definitely out of stock. So the next pairing is between one of the decks that I received recently as a Kickstarter and is quickly becoming one of my favorite. Such an amazing deck, I have to say, and it's this one here, Tarocchi Gialli, by Nick Ribera, and the description is by Bianca Craig. So the company of Nick Ribera is the Chain Assembly. They have a lot of decks. There's another Kickstarter campaign which is now currently founding. It's called the Sugar Plum Tarot, and I believe, I haven't backed it, but I believe it's for Christmas. I'm not entirely sure, but it might be. So this is a very special deck, and it's got a very special meaning for me because, as you can read here, it's a Rider-Waite tarot deck inspired by Italian horror cinema. So these are constructed, they're built up to be looking like movie posters from Italian horror movies from the 60s and the 70s. I was too little, I was born in the middle of the 70s, I was too little to obviously go to the movies because there would have been, you know, probably MA, and we do have a different classification system in Italy, so if you're not, you can't go to watch these movies unless you're 18 or older. So obviously I wasn't, and it was just the middle of the 90s that I was able to go watch these movies in a movie theater. But the experience of watching them in a TV, however, felt like it was even more it was giving me more because of the style, the colors, you know, the cinematography of these movies. Now, these ones are not actual posters, so it's not like we're going to have a look at these and recognize a movie or two. These are inspired, so these are completely new, let's put it this way, because I actually did not understand that when I backed it. I thought that they were actual posters. I do not mind it at all that they're not. I still love them with all my heart. It's something that really resonates with me. I really love horror movies, and to be honest with you, one thing that I was doing when I was probably 14, because I was not able to go to the movies, it was, you know, I was too young, but we did have a horror movie club in high school, so between I was 14 until I was 18 or something like that. And I remember that one of the members of this club could source a lot of VHS, so movies in video cassettes, because her sister was older and she could actually go to Blockbuster and rent or buy these movies without having any kind of problems. Now, this one is really amazing, and I've been thinking a lot about what do I pair it with, what oracle deck do I pair it with. And I have to say, I tried a few different ones, but this one is definitely the best one. And it's the classic horror oracle by Riccardo Disegno. This is an oracle deck that has been published probably about a year ago. It is a mass market release by Chronicle Books, so I got my copy out of Amazon. I'm not entirely sure that it's still available, but I don't see why it wouldn't be. And the reason why I believe this is actually the best option when it comes to pairings, and trust me, I have a lot of darker or horror movie inspired oracles and tarot decks, but this one was definitely the winner. And it's because it feels like, whilst the art style in these cards is from the 60s and the 70s, this definitely feels like probably the beginning of the 90s. And I don't know if you agree with me, but the 70s and the 90s actually go really well together. And so this one is also based obviously on movies. I mean, this one, without actually expressly saying it, this is from Rosemary's Baby. I definitely recognize Mia Farrow with the nightgown. Well, I mean, that's what I'm thinking of, and I don't really recognize the castle here. Granted, I've only watched the movie once, but I really do believe that it's inspired on that. And so this one is the Birds by Hitchcock, for example. And each and every one of these cards is actually really amazing. This is The Shining. You can tell, you know, with obviously the twins and you know, Wendy and Jack Nicholson. I don't know, we are looking at movies in both the decks. We're looking at very similar kind of vibes. It's obviously horror movies in both the decks. Granted, the images are not the same because this is, let's say, mixed media, but you do have a lot of photography and manipulated obviously photography, and in this case you only have graphic styles, but at the same time I think it works. And it was the other day that I was trying this pairing together, and I was just choosing to focus on the cards rather than, let's say, finding out which ones of the movies the cards of the oracle are referring to. But it was really good. And this is Get Out, which is one of my favorite horrors ever of all time. Such an amazing psychological horror. And I was getting into the vibes of the oracle and looking into reading it together with these cards, with the tarot decks, and it's just an absolutely fantastic pair. It is very dark because of the nature and the vibes of both the decks, but I have to say it just works like a charm. Really beautiful, and in many cases you know, you're actually kind of invited in. It feels like you're not just a spectator, you're not just part of the audience, you're actually participating actively in the in this pairing, flipping the cards, but also listening to the message, perhaps participating in the conversation that these two decks have. And I just absolutely love it. Not to talk about the fact that every now and then there's a lot of symbology that is recurring between the two decks, and that's when I like them the most. Obviously this is the ring with the video cassette, absolutely fantastic. You know, the theme and the trope of the haunted video cassette has come back. Lately, there's one of the latest books by Paul Tremblay. It's called Horror Movie, and it's definitely about a haunted horror movie and the cast that filmed it. So there is this sense of meta film, so a horror movie into a horror movie. This is the Babadook. By the way, the Babadook is an Australian production, if you weren't aware. And there is another horror movie coming out from the same producers, The Moo Guy, and oh my goodness, it's really scary. I watched the trailers yesterday. It was really amazing. So these two together, absolutely fantastic. Really stoked to have these two and being able to work with them. And also, you know, sometimes I'm actually pulling a card just from the oracle just to decide what movie to watch, because it's actually a kind of a decider. You know, it tells you Children of the Corn, is it? Might be, maybe not, but it's okay. There's some of these movies that I even forget the title of, but they're so famous. I think this guy is called Jason. The Bride of Frankenstein, etc. Really, really love these two together. So the next pairing is more graphic, let's say, not graphic as in graphic images, as in triggering, but graphic as in for the, when it concerns the art style. And it's between the Gothic Tarot by Joseph Vargo and the Earth and Bone Oracle by Syrian Shadow. By the way, I know that Syrian Shadow has released another Kickstarter a few months ago. I backed it. And I don't remember the Gothic literature, I think it's called, and I haven't received it yet, but it's on it. I believe it's on its way or something like that. And I have to be honest, I backed so many Kickstarter this year that it's kind of difficult for me now to keep track of all of them. And they're kind of slowly making their way to me, which is awesome, obviously. I cannot wait because some of them are really dark, and I kind of hope that they get here before the end of the month, so I could do you know, some kind of a really cool Halloween reading with all of these decks, new ones that have arrived. Now this pairing is mostly based, let's say, on similarities in images and colors, so mostly aesthetics. But I have to say, even the vibes are very, very conducive of a good reading, let's put it this way. So you will not be disappointed when doing a reading with these two together. It's just that it's, I don't know if you have the same, but in my case, when I decide what decks to use and how to pair them up, it's not just for the aesthetics of it all. It's not just because I like looking at decks that go well together, and definitely yes, that is a thing. I do like to do so when they pair up really well together. It is very beautiful to see how they reconnect with each other, how they start this conversation, and finding out all the echoes and resonances between the cards is simply amazing. But at the same time, when I want to use them for my personal practice, I need to get something out of them, in the sense of perhaps I'm doing some kind of work, and obviously by looking at these decks you would think it was something related to shadow work, and it's definitely a possibility. But at the same time, it needs to bring a lot of an epiphany. So an epiphany for me is when I see, let's say, similar or the same kind of symbols between the two decks. So imagine now, okay, there's a gargoyle, but imagine that there had been a lion here. So in this case, it's completely random because I shuffle the decks and I'm just pairing them up together. But there's a lion in the oracle and also the tarot card. That to me is an epiphany, in the sense that perhaps this is a sign that I should really read the message coming out of these cards. So when I find something like that, there are examples of decks that do that all the time, and those are, I believe, my favorite pairings, in the sense that they are the most successful ones. But then again, this is just my personal opinion. I'm actually interested to know if you work with tarot and oracle in this way, so pairing them up, what do you actually ask of the cards? How do you let's say, determine whether a pairing is successful or not? Do you rely exclusively on aesthetics? Do you also need some kind of similar vibes when it comes to the energies of the decks? Do you also have what I call epiphanies, when you look at the cards and there's very similar symbols? Or it is something completely different? I mean, obviously you do you. This is what actually works for me. But I'm very interested to know what other readers or collectors do or look for in a pairing. So I love this. By the way, I love this deck. I don't know if you can see it, because it is a rather dark deck when it comes to not just the theme but also the colors. But look at the red. Isn't it just amazing? And I've seen a lot of people trimming this deck down to just the artwork and maybe putting a small number to refer to the card. I might actually look into that, even though I have to say, when I purchased this deck, it was very affordable. It is a mass market deck, both of them mass market. But when I looked into the companion book, I saw it for only $60–70 Australian, which is a bit over the top, I believe. because I believe it's not even a hardcover, it's a paperback. So I think that that price is because there's not much availability of the book. So I'm wondering whether the deck itself is going out of print. I'm not saying that I know these things. I'm saying that I'm wondering whether that is the reason. I'm loving the fact that we are looking at this really beautiful, cool blues between the three cards. So these ones definitely, I would say, not the darkest ones on my pairings, but there's definitely nothing campy about these cards, or at least that's not, let's say, what I feel whilst looking at them. So definitely a darker pairing. And another pairing that I really love is between these two decks. So the Trick or Treat Tarot by Barbara Moore, illustrated by Jonathan Hunt, Llewellyn Publication, and the Halloween Forever Oracle by Tess Whitehurst, and the artwork is by JBG, Jasmine Becker Griffith. This is a Blue Angel deck, very recent release, absolutely gorgeous deck. If you have Les Vampires, Le Vampire, by also released by Blue Angel, and with the artwork by JBG, you will probably recognize a lot of the cards, not in the sense that we have the same cards. Obviously we're talking about vampires against sometimes fays or really different kinds of supernatural beings in the Halloween or Forever Oracle. However, there is that very recognizable art style of the girls with really big eyes, for example. And so this is recognizable if you have different decks with the artwork by JBG. This is the Trick or Treat Tarot, as I said, and it's absolutely, I just adore this deck. It's really, this is another definition for me of campy, but this one knows it, and it's not subtle. Let me put it this way. So obviously, because we're calling it the Treat or Treat, so it's not just the trick, but we're also looking at the treat. So it is a treat for the eyes, and even more so when we're pairing these two up together. We're not looking at the same art style, obviously, because the Trick or Treat is not illustrated by JBG, but I do believe that because of this way that Blue Angel is publishing its most recent Oracle decks, so not Oracle size, but let's say more like tarot size, I actually really like what we can do with this here. So obviously, because they're, let's say they're narrower than the usual Oracle standard size, you can actually pair them up better, I believe, with tarot decks. So you have a more balanced kind of layout, that's what I mean. And when it comes to the images, they're absolutely amazing. I also really love the keywords or the titles. Sometimes they're not necessarily recognizable, they're not straightforward, and therefore I do recommend going back to the book, the guidebook for the Halloween Forever. But it is very beautiful, it's very amazing, and I really love when we have a triad in this case, you know, and there's one which is breaking the fourth wall, looking directly at the reader with the Two of Wands, but there's also the Voodoo in Violet, which is doing the same thing, whereas the Devil is just, it's looking at us. I don't know if you can tell. She's tilting her head on one side, but the eyes are clearly looking at the reader. So there is this sense of invitation, and there's also a sense of, you know, inviting you to bask into the glory of Halloween and how whimsical a festivity is, but at the same time we want to be scared, because sometimes scary is actually liberating. Scary or getting scared and looking for, seeking the thrill of being scared is a very positive kind of jolt to the nervous system. It gives you a shot of adrenaline, you know, and that's the reason why obviously there is a bit of a chuckle afterwards, because once you're scared and you find out that you're not in danger, then you tend to laugh. And that's what happens when you look at scary movies sometimes. You chuckle to yourself because the reaction was probably over the top when you screamed or when you gasped, but at the same time you actually like it. You like it when it feels that way. So these are definitely two decks that pair up really well when it comes to these kind of vibes, and I really love pairing them together. I have to say, when it comes to the colors, the Trick or Treat Tarot is fantastic. It just shows you all of the colors on the Pantone scales. It is rather amazing, and it does pair up really well when it comes to color palette and aesthetics with the Halloween Forever. Obviously, as I said before, we're not looking at the same artist, so obviously we're not expecting the same art style, but I think it works. Let me know in the comments below what you think about it. Do you have the Trick or Treat Tarot, and do you pair it up perhaps with the Halloween Oracle, also published by Blue Angel, or perhaps with a different deck? I feel that it would pair up well with the Horror Oracle that we've just seen before. But I believe that the Halloween Forever is very nice as well. Also, if you have the Halloween Oracle by Blue Angel, let me know if you pair it with a different tarot deck, because I think it may pair up well, really well, with the deck by Maggie Stiefvater. What's it called? The Raven's Prophecy, I believe it's called. I think that they do share similar vibes, and so I don't have that deck, unfortunately, and there's a reason. Because I actually saw the French edition of that deck, the Raven's Prophecy, and the French edition is fantastic. Really, really cool. The font is completely different. It's more readable. I really love it, but the only way to procure it is to buy through Amazon France, and obviously they want to charge me for shipping, and the deck is not exactly cheap. So there's a number of reasons why I don't have that deck, but one day, perhaps if I go back to Europe, I will try and get that deck, because it's really, really cool, and I believe it goes for fantastic readings, especially in this Spooktober month. So these two really nice together. And when it comes to the kind of vibes, I would say that we're in between. Obviously, as always, JBG's art style really makes you think. It makes you think, because you delve into the art style of the cards. There's a lot of serious characters here. You don't really feel like chuckling, whereas the Trick or Treat Tarot is designed to make you chuckle. I mean, look at this, obviously. So I don't know where I stand when it comes to defining the vibes, but I don't always have to know that. If a pairing is working for me or for you, obviously it's worth looking into. And the next pairing is actually an oldie but goodie, because I have talked about the Somnia Tarot a number of times. There's a few oracle decks that I like to pair it with, and I have to say, today I'm not going to show you the usual one, which is actually not even an oracle deck. It's a writer's prompt kind of deck. But I believe that we can try this pairing out. So the Somnia Tarot with the Dark Magic Oracle by Fiona Horner. And I have to say, I got another deck by Fiona recently, and I just don't remember which one it was. I think it's the Lost Oracle. Yes, it's the Lost Oracle, and I was pairing it up with Fyodor Pavlov, which was a fantastic pairing, and I think I posted the video a couple of days ago. So if you haven't watched my latest, I think it was my favorite deck for fall. So I was pairing up the Fyodor Pavlov with the Lost Oracle, and it's just absolutely freaking amazing. And so because I really liked also the guidebook of the Lost Oracle, I looked into what else I've got by Fiona, and I found this one. And to be honest with you, I had even forgotten that I had this deck, and it's actually really beautiful. And so I was going through the Somnia Tarot, and I thought to myself, why don't I try this pair up, because I believe that it's going to work. And it really did, or at least I think it did. Obviously, we're looking at, there's similarities, but there's also differences between the decks. Now, whilst the Dark Magic Oracle definitely tells you, or it gives you darker vibes, and it's also in the title, so that's what you would normally expect, the Somnia Tarot is not necessarily a dark deck, even though I have to say, for many, many reasons, and the claustrophobia especially that it makes me feel sometimes when I look at the cards, it does have that kind of effect. And so I was thinking, maybe we're looking at a really dark pair in this case. But let me know in the comments below, let me know what you think. Obviously, these are both photographic decks, even though we're looking at a different style of photography. They are incredibly beautiful, I have to say. And also I really like and appreciate the keywords and also the messages at the bottom of the oracle cards. So for example, blush, love is blooming, which is ironically a very bright and breezy card to be pulled out of a deck that is called Dark Magic. But then again, this deck feels like it's actually very balanced and I really appreciate it. So this is what I was telling you about earlier. This is, to me, looks like an epiphany. Why? Because there's just duality, the symbol of the number 2 that is brought in many of the symbols on the card. So we've got the 2 swords and the 2 of swords. We got the way in which the 2 arms of the character on the greening card, you are a natural, spread out like that, which really reminds me of this aperture, this way in which we are embracing everything. So there is closure and uncertainty and confusion and anxiety here. There's openness and trustworthiness here. But at the same time, we have the 4 of Cups in which this character is actually carrying 2 buckets on their shoulder, but at the same time it looks like their hands are actually tied at the back. So there's a lot going on between the symbology of number 2. And there's so many things that we can work with here. So as I was saying earlier, 2 decks to me, when I decide whether they pair up or their pairing is successful or not, is because they need to give me something back. It's not just based on aesthetics. And I have to say, these 2 are fantastic together. When you focus on the vibes and not just the aesthetics, you look in a very, very interesting vibes, very interesting energies, very deep and potent kind of messages, which I really appreciate. And I just really like, and sometimes I just really like to flip the cards like that and just, you know, look at the images and feel if there's something that they want to tell me. Try and shush my mind and just listen to the messages, tune in to the conversation that these 2 decks have. And obviously, you know, if it doesn't work, obviously I move on to different decks. If it does, I keep on working with the same. Now I have to say, compared to the Somnia, the Dark Magic Oracle is rather dark. Well, I'm talking about the images, let's say, and the white balance. And this may also be due to the fact that the Somnia has white borders. I know that some of you have trimmed the borders off, so I wonder if that would be the case, if it worked better without the white borders. I'm not going to trim this deck because it was extremely expensive. It's an indie deck that to have it shipped to Australia, good luck. And I bought it together with the book, so it was really expensive. So I'm not going to trim it. I'm not going to do that because I am going to kick myself for doing that one day that I actually decide that I want the borders back. It's not going to be able to reacquire. I do sometimes trim the borders of mass market decks, especially when they're a bargain. And then I decide that I actually like them, prefer them with the borders, and I repurchase the deck. That's possible when we're talking about $20. $200 is a completely different story. Loving the cocoon between the star and the High Priestess, by the way, it could not be more eloquent. So these 2 really, when it comes to the vibes, I would say we're still within the realm of darker kind of vibes. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about these 2 decks together. So we're looking at what I call the Madame Lydia Tarot or the Lydia Tarot. The full title, as you all know, is the Madame Lydia Wilhelmina's Tarot of Monsters, the Macabre and Autumn Scenes. And it's by Bethelyn Bajema. And I decided today to pair it up with the Oracle of Oddities by Claire Goodchild. Now, I have to say something about the Madame Lydia Tarot. So I follow Bethelyn's Instagram account, both of them. And Bethelyn has been, so she is very ill. She's been very ill for many years. She's battling a lot. She has the heart of a lion. She's always fighting back. I am amazed by how strong Bethelyn is and I always try and support her. So she wasn't active on Instagram for almost a year, if not longer. I have seen a couple of posts lately, and she herself, she said, I'm not gonna say what happened during the time in which I was away. So we can imagine that she was probably still trying to cure herself and heal. But now she says she's back. So what I'm thinking is, when she has the energy, she actually reopens her shop, and sometimes she reprints the Madame Lydia Tarot. So if you missed out on this deck and you absolutely want it, keep an eye out, and I highly recommend following Bethalynn's Instagram account, because she would actually give news out on when she is planning, if she's planning, and when she's planning to reprint. It is an absolutely unique and amazing tarot deck. I really love it. When it goes out of print, it sells for, like, I've seen it sell for $500 US, which is way out of my budget. But at the same time, if you can afford it, I can see someone loving this deck so much that they actually spend that much money on it, because it is worth it. Obviously, a deck is worth as much as the collector is willing to pay for it. And I wouldn't have been willing to pay that much money. But to be honest with you, I was very lucky, because I bought it in one of the times in which Bethalyn was actually reprinted, so I only paid $70 for it. But I have to say, I am extremely grateful that I have this deck, because it is incredible. It is curated art with a lot of collage as well, but the style and the way in which the spookiness is presented, these you know, elements in the cards that take you by surprise, because you would not expect them. Like, for example, this card is amazing. It's the Strength card, and you wouldn't expect to see the horns on the top of the head of the of this Renaissance style painting, but also the eyes have been modified, and there's a lot of these elements in the cards. These are elements that make you think, they make you take a second look at the cards and try and figure out what the meaning of the card is. So it is one of those decks that you can read, let's say, if you just want to read it as an RWS coin, but at the same time you would actually miss out on a lot, because there's this card, for example, shows you the Fool with a jack-o'-lantern head. And isn't it just amazing? There is so much to this deck, and I absolutely love it. And as I said, I will never be tired of promoting and supporting Bethalyn, because I just really highly appreciate and applaud the way in which she is tackling her illness. And she's, you know, and she's coming back time and time again. It's been amazing. I've been following her for years on Instagram, and I've communicated with her. I always told her how much I admire her, and she's a lovely person, absolutely lovely person. So I highly recommend, even if you don't like the deck, just check out her artwork on Instagram, because it is actually really, really eclectic and very amazing. And these two decks together are just fantastic. I'm sorry I didn't talk a lot about the Oracle of Oddities. It is an indie deck. I believe it might be still available as some resellers in the US. I'm not entirely sure. This is a mix of the 3 editions of the Oracle of Oddities, and I absolutely love it. There's also a Memento Mori Lenormand / Oracle. And this is the same creator, author of the Antique Anatomy deck. So if you recognize the style, it's because of that. The Antique Anatomy was originally in the deck, but then it was picked up mass market, and it's actually quite affordable now. So that was it for today for these Spooktober pairings. As promised, I told you guys the pairings, my favorite tarot and oracle pairings for this month would have been all about spooky vibes. But I just really love these decks year round. I have to say, some of them, the Trick or Treat Tarot, for example, I only use it in this month, but many other decks I use them year round, because they're just really, really beautiful, and they're something that I absolutely adore. Now, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like, please don't forget to like and subscribe this video. If you haven't already, it really means a lot to me, because it makes my channel grow. And guess what? When I can grow my channel, then it means that I can post even more content. But for now, have a great day.